thank you very much for those fascinating talk that of course advanced a very clear thesis, which I'm sure will be the source of lively discussion. And as with all events for our new center, the idea is that we have ample of time to talk to each other afterwards, to ask questions, to challenge the speaker, but not too much, and so on. I should also say the one thing I did forget at the beginning was to introduce myself. My name is Tom Weber, and I'm the director of the new center. So without any further ado, questions, challenges?
Thank you very much, and it was a very interesting and fascinating insight from somebody who's been on the ground out there in that other tumultuous part of the world. Can I run this past you for your comment that yes, the monarchs in the Gulf have been a bit more progressive over the past 10 or 15 years than many of the presidents of the nationalist republics to the north. One of the ironies is that often when they have an assembly or a parliament in somewhere like Kuwait, what you then find is that the elected representatives are much more conservative than the monarchs. For example, in Kuwait, when the Emir was trying to push women's suffrage in Kuwait, it was actually the elected assembly of the citizens, who are usually men, who opposed it. And the same applies in Qatar, where at least the wife of the king is very enthusiastic about boys and girls being in rooms like this together. It tends to be the assembly that actually wants to take a step backwards and separate male and female education. So there are these kind of problems down there in the Gulf.
Well, and in Jordan as well. I mean, in Jordan we have, since you're talking about the first ladies, I mean, in Jordan, I think the First Lady is playing a very important role in that she is basically, she's going about without a headscarf, for example, and I think that plays a very important role for the monarch himself, because it allows him to pursue a sort of fairly straight path with his wife kind of, introducing certain reforms in a way. So I think, yes, definitely, we do have, I'm not too sure about the population of Kuwait and Qatar, in what way they are more conservative than the populations of Tunisia, Egypt, wherever. I mean, you probably need to have elections for that to find out. For me, the most important thing is actually that there are there have been political reforms, and they are still undertaking them. And I think for me that would be the first step, basically. What turns out, what comes out of this, I'm not quite sure. But I think Kuwait is actually a fairly positive example for reforms. I'm not quite sure whether it will be in 10 years or 15 years anymore, but I do see your point. Whether it says anything about the population or the monarchy itself, I'm not sure.
Other questions or interventions?
The question, yes. I suppose I'm, out of ignorance, I'm just wondering where you might fit Iran in your model, because in some ways, I suppose, not a monarchy, but I suppose with the Ayatollah and the separation of the Ayatollah and his spiritual authority from the government, with a prime minister who we know about, in a way it looks more like a monarchy than a republic. So I suppose, since you're a journalist, I can push you to predict a little. I'm wondering if you could sort of apply your model to Iran and to...
Well, with Iran, I can't really apply it to any... I don't really think it fits in either of the two categories. I recently went there, and I had the feeling that the population is still very much against, the regime, basically. I mean, I only talked to people, so I don't know how representative it was. But I have the feeling that that Iran theoretically is on a very good way, but the police state is, the police state is actually maybe it's a little similar to Syria, in my opinion, because they have a very similar setup. The ruling elite is just very much in power. The people are, in my opinion, pretty much against it, but they can't really do anything about it. I mean, there's a huge frustration at the moment in Iran, but I mean, who wants to go to the streets right now? I wouldn't. So I don't really think it fits in either category, but still, if you ask me, I'd say Syria is probably the one that comes closest.
It's of course interesting that you bring up Iran here, which in a way, of course, invites the question of whether you think, is there anything that you of course very much emphasize the differences between different Arab states. Is there anything about the political situation in the Arab world that you would say is distinctively different from what's happening in Iran?
Distinctly different in the Arab world from Iran?
Yes.
Well, in the end, Iran is so different from any Arab country that I find that the main difference, basically, I mean, you would never want to say to an Iranian sort of that he's Arab or something, and I think there's a good reason for it. I have the feeling that they've undergone a complete different history in a way, so comparing it is rather difficult, I guess.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Just speaking on the same point, we talk of the Arab world, and we just keep silent on the links with the other world. At this time, I mean the West. Now, when you just link your thesis about the possible changes in the monarchies and then the Republicans, but even the current status in Libya and then Tunisia has given us a different form. Do you think that the nature these states have in terms of links with the Western world somehow maybe supports the possibility of change? For example, like being in total isolation or being independent, does it facilitate or does it make it maybe harder for the changes?
Well, I think Tunisia is so Western-oriented and so influenced by Europe in a way that I think, well, it came to me as a surprise as well that unrest happened over there as well. But I think Tunisia is probably even more prone to change than Libya, for example. I mean, Libya, I see major differences between Tunisia and Libya, but more similarities between the two countries than to Jordan, for example. And often in the coverage in the media, you read like about Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Jordan in one go. But I don't think the protests are the same.